Hello dear students, welcome once again to Rayat Online School Education Program and myself Professor P.B. Sargade from Sadhguru Gadge Maharaj College Karad, and we were discussing about the important topic from our biology syllabus, that is control and coordination. This is the fourth lecture from our topic. Now let's begin. Now, in previous lectures, we have studied the cranial and spinal nerves and the spinal cord in detail. Now, today we will discuss about the reflex action and the other nervous systems in detail. What is the reflex action? It is a sudden, spontaneous, automatic, and involuntary response to the stimulus which is given by the nervous system. The response to stimulus is said to be involuntary as it is carried out without any conscious effort by the brain. The path along which the action is carried out is called as reflex arc. Now I will repeat it again. The path along which the action is carried out is called as a reflex arc. Now moving towards the next slide. What are the types of reflex actions? Now when we study in detail the types of reflex actions, we found that on the basis of control over the actions, there are two reflexes. The first is cranial reflexes. The second is spinal reflexes. Then on the basis of previous experiences, there are again two types, that is first unconditional reflexes and the second conditional reflexes. And according to number of synapses involved, there are again two types, the simple monosynaptic reflex actions and complex polysynaptic reflexes or reflex actions. Now these were the types of reflex action based on various parameters in our nervous system. Again, accordingly, the peripheral nerves or the nervous systems are classified as the point A, afferent nerves. Now these afferent nerve fibers transmit sensory impulse from tissue or organ to the CNS, that is central nervous system, and the efferent nerves or the efferent nerve fibers transmit regulatory or motor impulses from the CNS, that is central nervous system, to the various peripheral tissues and organs. Now this was about the afferent nerves and efferent nerves. Now moving towards the next slide, the peripheral nervous system or PNS is divided into two parts, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system relays impulses from central nervous system or CNS to the skeletal or voluntary muscles of the body. And about the autonomic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system transmits impulses from CNS, that is central nervous system, to the involuntary organs and smooth muscles of the body. Now this was about the peripheral nervous system or PNS. Now in previous lecture I have told you that the central nervous system is denoted by the short form CNS, the PNS means peripheral nervous system, and ANS means autonomic or autonomous nervous system. Here now what is the origination and what are the effects and what parts are involved in this? The somatic nervous system, the part is the central nervous system, then peripheral nervous system, and this is the target organs. Now here in central nervous system, the cyton of the nerve fiber or neuron is involved, then it transmits through this region and the target organ is the skeletal muscle. Then in sympathetic nervous system, here the paravertebral or prevertebral ganglion is present, and here it is to the target organ smooth muscles. Then parasympathetic nervous system, here again the terminal ganglion, and the target organ is glands and cardiac muscles. Now here the short forms. Here the short forms are given as ACH, that means acetylcholine. NE means norepinephrine. Now this is the ganglionic axon. Now this is this region. Then this is the ganglion, and this is the postganglionic axon. Now this is the diagrammatic and chart-wise representation of the respective parts. Now moving towards the next slide, what is about the autonomic or autonomous nervous system? It consists of two parts. Again, the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. As discussed in this slide, again, the autonomic nervous system transmits impulses from CNS or central nervous system to the involuntary organs and smooth muscles of the body. And as described in the earlier slide, the autonomic nervous system consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Moving towards the next slide, the comparison between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Here a chart, a very good chart is given. Here the organ, then sympathetic effect and parasympathetic effects are given. Now the organ is heart, and the mechanism involved is the heartbeat. The sympathetic effect is it increases the heartbeat, and the parasympathetic effect is it decreases the heartbeat. Then the organ is blood vessels. The sympathetic effect is the blood vessels, they are constricted or they constricts, and in parasympathetic effect the blood vessels they dilate. Now remember the effects of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Then arterial BP means arterial blood pressure. It increases in the sympathetic effect, and in parasympathetic effect it decreases. Then pupil of eye is the organ, and the sympathetic effect it dilates, and in parasympathetic effect it constricts. The organ here is gastrointestinal movements or gastrointestinal region. In sympathetic effect it retards peristalsis, and in parasympathetic effect it accelerates peristalsis. And in urinary bladder, sympathetic effect is it relaxes the bladder, and in parasympathetic effect it contracts the bladder. Now these are the organs, these are the sympathetic effects, and these are the parasympathetic effects. Now the sympathetic effects and parasympathetic effects, they are crossing or they are opposite to each other. Now moving towards the next slide. Now this is the peripheral autonomic nervous system. Here the brain, this is the spinal cord, the spinal nerves, the organs which are involved in this region. Now in parasympathetic, the diagram indicates the pupil constriction, then secretion of saliva, then here effect to the lungs, then heartbeat slows, then stimulates the secretion of production of bile, then all the effects on the stomach, then heart, liver, large and small intestine, ovary, then urinary bladder, testes. Here the effect in the sympathetic is shown, and the diagrammatically the nerves and the effects are shown here in the parasympathetic and sympathetic mechanism. And this diagram indicates all the effector organs and the actions which are performed by these organs. Now moving towards the next part is the ANS or autonomous nervous system consists of a special set of peripheral nerves that regulate the activities of involuntary organs like cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands, etc. Then in this, the impulses are conducted from the central nervous system by an axon that synapses with an autonomous ganglion. Now remember this point. In this, the impulses are conducted from the central nervous system or CNS by an axon that synapses with an autonomous ganglion. Then it is preganglionic neuron. Then the second neuron in this ganglionic pathway has an axon that extends from the autonomic ganglion to an effector organ and is known as postganglionic neuron. Now, this was the information. Then, moving towards the next point, the point number A, sympathetic nervous system or SNS. It is also called thoracolumbar outflow. It originates in the thoracic and lumbar region of spinal cord, that is T1 to L3. That means the thoracic first vertebra to the lumbar third vertebra, and consists of 22 pairs of sympathetic ganglia which lie on a pair of sympathetic cords on lateral sides of the spinal cord. Then the preganglionic nerve fibers are short and postganglionic nerve fibers are long. Adrenaline and noradrenaline is produced at the terminal ends of postganglionic nerve fibers at the effector organ, hence it is also called adrenergic fibers. Here, the sympathetic nervous system controls body activities during emergencies, that is fight or flight response, that is fight or runaway response. It has excitatory and stimulating effect on most organs of the body except in the digestive and the excretory organs. Now, this was about the sympathetic nervous system or SNS. Now, moving towards the next slide, the parasympathetic nervous system. Here, the parasympathetic nervous system, it is also called craniosacral outflow. Remember these terminologies because they may be asked to the single sentence answers and multiple choice questions. It is also called craniosacral outflow. It consists of the branches from the cranial, that is 3rd, 7th, 9th and 10th nerves, sacral, 2nd and 3rd, and spinal, 4th nerves. It consists of ganglia which are very close or within the wall of the effector organs. The preganglionic nerves are long and postganglionic nerves are short. Acetylcholine is produced at the terminal end of postganglionic nerve at the effector organ. Remember this point. The acetylcholine is produced at the terminal end of postganglionic nerve at the effector organ. Hence, these are also called as cholinergic fibers. Now remember this terminology. These are also called as cholinergic fibers. Then parasympathetic nervous system is antagonistic to sympathetic nervous system. It brings back to normal all activities which are stimulated by the sympathetic system. Hence, it is also called housekeeping system. Remember this point. Parasympathetic nervous system is antagonistic to sympathetic nervous system. As discussed in earlier slides, it brings back to normal all activities or all actions which are stimulated by the sympathetic system. Hence, it is also called housekeeping system. It keeps all the things clear. It has an inhibitory effect on most organs. However, the activities like those associated with digestion, peristalsis, and micturition, which are inhibited by sympathetic system, are thus accelerated by the parasympathetic system. Now remember this point. The answers to all these questions are the presence of a sensory system in our body. It consists of simple to complex structures called sensory receptors. Now this was about the parasympathetic nervous system. Moving towards the next point about the sensory receptors. Now the sensory receptors are some specialized structures in the body to receive the various stimuli from the external or internal environment. Remember, the sensory receptors are some specialized structures in the body which receive the various stimuli from the external or internal environment. Then, the nature of the receptor is defined by a type of stimuli that it can respond to. Example, a photoreceptor responds to light. What exactly is the meaning of the receptor? It implies that when a specific type of stimulus reaches the sensory neuron, that is receptor, it causes the production of an action potential in it, and this action potential is carried in the form of an impulse. These impulses are conducted to the different functional areas of the brain for processing and interpretation. This was about the sensory receptors. Moving forward, the classification of receptors. Receptors are classified on the basis of their location, function, and their sensitivity to specific stimuli. Now, the types of receptors. The exteroreceptors, that is receive external stimuli. Here the phonoreceptors and statoreceptors, photoreceptors, all these receptors, they are present, and I will explain you all the points about these receptors. The phonoreceptors, they are having the location in internal ear organ of corti. It is responsible for the function of sound reception. Then statoreceptors, they are located in the internal ear of semicircular. In internal ear there is presence of semicircular canals, and the function is receptors are responsible for maintaining balance and equilibrium. Then photoreceptors, as I discussed earlier, the photoreceptors, they are located in the retina of eye, and they receive sensory stimuli for the vision. Then the next is thermoreceptors. They are present in the skin and they receive sensory stimulus for heat, that is calororeceptors and cold, trigadoreceptors. These are the thermoreceptors. Then mechanoreceptors, they are present in the skin again. They do the function of sensitive to mechanical stimulus like touch, pain, pressure, deep pressure, etc. Then chemoreceptors. There are two types, gustatoreceptors and olfactory receptors. Now about the gustatoreceptors, they are located in the taste buds of tongue, and they are sensitive to taste of sweet, salt, sour, bitter, and umami flavor or taste. Then olfactory receptor, they are located in the olfactory epithelium of nose, and the function is they are sensitive to about 10,000 different smells. Now this was about the various types of receptors. Now moving forward, in the types of receptors, other three receptors are remaining. The enteroreceptors, they receive stimuli from the body. The first is enteroreceptors. The location is from internal body organs, or their origination is, and the function is they are sensitive to stimuli coming from internal organs like hunger, thirst, pain, then osmotic change, etc. Then proprioceptors, they are located in joints, muscles, and tendons, or they are arising from that, and they detect the changes in the movements of joints, tendons, and muscles, then pain, tension, and sensitive to vibrations. Now these are the interoceptors, and in that we have seen enteroreceptors, then proprioceptors, and the last point, number C, is baroreceptors. As the name suggests, these are also considered as mechanoreceptors, receiving signals from internal organs. They are present in walls of atria, vena cava, aortic arc, and carotid sinus. The sense function is the sense changes in blood pressure so as to restore homeostasis through vasodilation or vasoconstriction. Now this was about the types of receptors. Again, moving towards the next point, the types of receptors and the examples of stimuli. The chemoreceptors, the examples of stimuli: oxygen, then pH, various organic molecules such as glucose, then mechanoreceptors as discussed in earlier slide, the pressure, that is baroreceptors, cell stretch, that is osmoreceptors, vibration, acceleration, and sound. Then photoreceptors as discussed in earlier slide before, they are responsible for the stimuli photons of light, and thermoreceptors for varying degrees of heat. Now at this point we have completed the 4 lectures and we have completed our topic up to the classification of receptors, and in our next 5th lecture we will study the sense organs eye and ear. And for this today's lecture we will stop here. Thank you all of you.